welcome to the Recovery 2.0 Beyond Addiction Conference. I'm your host, Tommy Rosen, and today I am simply thrilled to be speaking with Bruce Lipton. Bruce Lipton, PhD, cell biologist and lecturer, is an internationally recognized leader in the new biology. His pioneering research on cloned stem cells presaged the revolutionary field of epigenetics, the new science of how environment and perception control genes. His breakthrough studies on the cell membrane, the skin of the cell, revealed that the behavior and health of the cell was controlled by the environment, findings that were in direct contrast with prevailing dogma that life is controlled by genes. His work has direct implications on the field of addiction and treatment of addiction, and we're just thrilled to have him here today. In 2009, Bruce received the prestigious Goi Peace Award in Japan in honor of his scientific contribution to world harmony. Bruce, thank you so much for lending your voice to the Recovery 2.0 conference. Welcome.
Tommy, I want to thank you so very much, and I appreciate all the work you're doing in helping us all evolve and get out of the problems that we're in and take us to a better world. So I'm so happy to be here to support your efforts.
Thank you. Well, I want to jump right in. I figured today we could look at the roots of addiction, and your work has, in my own recovery, my own life, and in helping others, your work has directly empowered me to be able to help people get past some of their sort of limitations that we have had in believing what's possible for us. So, but first, let's go back and let's look at the roots of addiction. Bruce, do you have in your work a general perspective on, or a definition or a way that you look at addiction?
Well, basically what I have to understand about biology is that throughout evolution, biological systems are given information in response to how they deal with the world around them. We call them emotions, sensations, feelings, symptoms, etc., like that. One of the major aspects is that nature has designed two senses of pain and pleasure as a way of teaching an organism to go in the right direction. In other words, we're smart, we go to school, we learn, cross the street, look both ways and all that kind of stuff like that. But you got smaller, lower forms of life, animals that are moving through the world. How do they know where to go and where not to go? How to do the right thing to stay alive? Well, nature has endowed them with a sense of feeling. And the significance about that is we are given two completely opposite senses. One is pain and one is pleasure. When pleasure is received by an organism or perceived by an organism, it really represents that you're doing the right thing. And that's why nature encourages you, says, look, this is really good, go this way. But when you start to do something that threatens your survival or is really not supportive, we receive a sensation of pain. And that's nature's way of saying, look, this is threatening to you. This is, inappropriate behavior, whatever it is, do something different. And it's kind of interesting because in our civilization and throughout history, that was manipulated a bit by the original church, which looked at pleasure as negative and pain as positive, which is like complete turnaround of the table of biology.
Some confusing messages there.
Absolutely, but it really causes a profound conflict in our biology. When our biology is telling us we're doing something right, gives us pleasure, and then our psychology is saying, no, that's wrong, don't do that. Then we have a conflict between programming and biology. And so basically what I see is that when we find ourselves in trauma and problems, we try to seek a way to get out. If you can't seek a way to get out, then you actually do some kind of other behavior or something else to lessen the pain. Because if you can't move and you're stuck in pain, then what are you supposed to do? Just live in that? Well, at our level of cognition and awareness, we can put in some other behavior and then actually override the current experience. So what we have to recognize is when people really are generally dealing with an addiction problem, they're really first trying to overcome some kind of pain in their life or threat to their survival or their existence, and then choose another alternative behavior. Unfortunately, the alternative behaviors don't necessarily take you out of the problem. So you stay in the problem, but even though you're trying to get mentally out of the problem. So,
Plus, a lot of these other behaviors have destructive elements of their own.
oh, I absolutely. But they're just a way of saying I'm not paying attention. I'm not paying attention, and therefore I'm living in this dream world.
Mm.
But the problem, as you just said, is the problems that arise from this alternate reality are sometimes more, detrimental than the original problem we started with.
But so the premise here is that, essentially people are trying to feel better.
It's a biological drive. You put any organism in a situation where it doesn't feel good, and it doesn't take a brain as like we have for it to say this isn't right. I've got to go find another avenue, another way to go to avoid this problem. So this is why it's so important, is because look, we're conscious enough to say, look, this is a right thing to do. This is a wrong thing to do. I can teach that to my child. This is right. This is wrong. They will learn that in their consciousness. Lower organisms don't have that faculty to do that. So they're simply their behavior is really under the control of an environment that says, if it's uncomfortable, then go find another place. And so it's a place of education.
Yes. Well, so in a sense, as you said, you gave that term lower organism. I think I'm thinking of my next book, which could be When Human Beings Behave Like Lower Organisms. Because, in a certain sense, if you look at a person who's caught in active addiction, they have given up the ability to choose. They've given up the ability to be able to decide, this is good for me, this is not good for me. They actually can't follow their biological directive to survive or to thrive. That's been thrown out the window.
Basically, they found a way to ameliorate or reduce the pain of the situation. And then it becomes habitual. Why? Because if I start to feel the same pain again, then I'm going to go back and say, what was it that allowed me to avoid the pain? And now the issue we have to really deal with, Tommy, is that there's two levels of our mind. There's the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. The conscious mind is the one connected to our personal identity, our spirit, our source, who we are as unique individuals. The subconscious mind is more or less a record playback device. And the significance about that is in the subconscious mind is habit. And that's just completely opposite than the conscious mind, which is creative. So the conscious mind doesn't fall into habit. That's the subconscious program. So what we have to recognize is this. And this is the biggest problem, not just with addiction. This is a problem that is worldwide, affecting all of us all the time. And that is, we believe that we're running our lives based on our wishes and desires. By definition, a wish and a desire is a creative thought because it's something you don't have, but it was something you want. So it doesn't exist, so you're looking for it. The conscious mind's expertise is creativity. So the conscious mind is the mind that has our wishes and our desires and what we want for life. The subconscious mind, habitual programs, okay? Now, the interesting aspect about this is if I got you a brand new iPod and I took it out of the box, and that little wheel on the front of the iPod called the click wheel, that's like the conscious mind. It's creative. The click wheel says, oh, I can make a playlist. I can change the volume. I can push pause, play, reverse. I can manually control. So the click wheel is like the conscious mind. So I say, okay, buy a brand new iPod, take it out of the box, and I say, push play on the click wheel. Nothing happens. And you say, oh, well, you didn't put any programs in there, so you can't play something. I go, this is precisely the nature of the mind and its development. The conscious mind is equivalent to the click wheel. The subconscious mind is the equivalent of the memory. So the idea is this. If you could talk to a baby the moment it's coming out of the birth canal, and the baby could talk, and you say, tell me something, the baby will say, oh, I don't know anything. I just got here. I don't know anything. And the point about it is this. Until you have experiences, until you have insight, until you have some kind of working knowledge, you can't be creative with your conscious mind. So here's the part that people don't understand. The first 7 years of our lives, our brain is in a activity called theta. When you put EEG wires on a person's head, alpha is a higher vibration, that's consciousness. Theta is a lower vibration. It's imagination. And this is why kids, by between 2 and 7, take the real world and the imaginary world, mix them together. You say that's a broom. They say that's a horse. To them, it's a horse at that time because the creative imagination of theta is operating. But people don't recognize theta as hypnosis. And the reason why we have to have this hypnosis period for 7 years is the same reason for the iPod. I cannot be creative if I have no data. So the idea is this, I just asked a simple question. How many rules does it take for a person to be an active, functional member of a family and a community and a world? And you say, well, oh my God, there's thousands of things you have to understand, who you are, what you are, how you interact. And I say, take an infant, sit them down at a desk, take a 3-year-old, say, sit down at the desk. Look, I have 10,000 rules for you to learn right now to be a member of the society. It's like, well, that's impractical. It's never going to happen. Nature overcomes that by automatically putting the brain in theta for the 7 years, at which time the child is just downloading other people's behavior and as their own. It's just a behavioral, this is how you respond to life. This is how my dad responds. This is how my mom responds. This is how we do it. So 7 years, I'm putting behavior
into the subconscious mind.
But into the subconscious mind. Before I can act, conscious mind doesn't even get activated as a predominant brain state until after 7.
Hasn't come online yet.
It hasn't come online because I don't have any data in my hard drive to work with.
Right.
So 7 years of data. Well, the most important understanding then is the fundamental programs in your subconscious mind are not yours. They came from observing other people. You observe other people's behavior, and then it becomes downloaded through hypnosis, theta, as your database. Okay, so now we have a creative conscious mind at 7. You say, oh, okay, good. This is my wishes, my desires, and what I want for life. I go, great. We wake up in the morning. You could be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Wake up in the morning and say, okay, I'm going out in the world and I'm going to go seek my wishes and my desires and all that. And then we come home every evening and it goes like, well, didn't get there today. and then all of a sudden, why this is a problem is because when people have trouble getting to their destination, the first thing is this, well, it's not me. I'm the one that wanted to be successful and the world just didn't offer it. I am a victim. Why? Because I have intended to do something really good, but it never showed up.
Hasn't played out that way.
Yeah. So, and the reason why this is problematic is simply this. The issue that people don't understand about the conscious creative mind and subconscious mind is this. The conscious mind not only is creative, but is not time bound. So I say, hey, Tommy, what are you doing next Wednesday? The moment you start thinking about what you're doing next Wednesday, the conscious mind's function is now sent into like a Rolodex in your head where, okay, what is happening on Monday or Wednesday or whatever, what, and why that's important is simply this. If I asked you to tell me what you're doing next Wednesday and something is going on around you at that moment, your conscious mind is not paying attention for a simple reason. Your conscious mind's not there. Okay? Well, scientists have now revealed this fact, which is, okay, now blow your mind. Only 5% of the day is the conscious mind running the show for a simple reason. 95% of the day, the conscious mind is engaged in thought. Every time it's thinking, it's not paying attention to what's out here. It's off in its head. Okay? So here's the relevance. 5% of the day we move toward wishes, desires, what we want. Even, the addict is like, yeah, I don't want this. This is not my life. I really want this and all that. And then I say, yeah, but that only works 5% of the day. 95% of the day you're coming from the habit. Yeah, but the habit was other people's behavior that you put into the subconscious first. And so 95% of the day, you're not operating from your wishes and desires. You're operating from a program.
Sure.
Okay. But now here's the catch, and then we'll get onto it. And
Sure.
That is this. By definition, if I am thinking all of a sudden, I say, what am I doing next Wednesday? I go into my head and I'm thinking about what I'm doing, what's on Wednesday. By definition, I'm not paying attention to what's going on. So that doesn't mean like you're walking down the street, you have a thought, and then you freeze while the thought happens. And then after the thought, then you start walking back down the street again. No, if you're walking down the street and you have a thought, the moment you have a conscious mind engaged in thought, the functions are defaulted to the subconscious program. So in other words, I know how to walk. That's a habit. I learned that. So I don't need my conscious mind to tell me how to walk. So my conscious mind goes in thought. I'm still walking. So whatever behavior I'm doing, driving a car, I don't have to pay attention to what's going on when I'm driving a car. I mean, the joke when I lecture about it is I say, look, I've been in a car with a passenger. We get so engaged in a conversation. My conscious mind is tied up with the conversation. And then all of a sudden I look out the window of the car and it dawns on me, I haven't paid attention to the road for the last 5 minutes.
Right. How did I get home?
Yeah, and here's what the neat part is. Well, look,
Yes.
driving is, once you practice and learn how to drive, practice makes habit. Habit means that the subconscious mind doesn't need you to explain how to drive and what to watch out for. The subconscious mind's already got the program.
Sure.
So basically, seamlessly, as I am talking to my friend in the car, my conscious mind's focused on that. My subconscious is driving the car.
Okay.
And I'm not paying attention. And this becomes critical, because if I said, look, let's say it was you, Tommy, you're driving the car, you're in the conversation, you just realize you haven't paid attention to the road. And I ask you two questions. I say, tell me what the conversation was about. You go, oh yeah, we talked about this and this and this and this. And I go, tell me what happened on the road during the 5 minutes. And you go, I don't know what happened. I didn't see it.
Sure.
Let me tie this into the last little story that will make sense to people now.
Yes.
And I give this in a lecture, and most people respond right away. And I say, look, I'm sure when you were young, you were close to a friend, you knew your friend's behavior very, very well, and you happen to know your friend's parent. And one day you see, oh my goodness, my friend has the same behavior as their parent. So you volunteer casually, say, hey, Bill, you're just like your dad. And you back away from Bill, because Bill goes totally ballistic and says, how the hell can you compare me to my dad? And everyone laughs. And I go, well, yeah, because everyone's familiar with it. I said, no. The most profound story I can tell you, Tommy, related to what's going on in the world, and for the audience out there, most profound story is this. Everybody else can see that Bill behaves like his dad. The only one who doesn't see it is Bill. I said, explain that. I go, simple. Bill got his behavior from downloading his father's behavior when he was before 7 years of age. That on his day-by-day basis, he's only 5% of the time being aware of what's going on, because 95% of the time he's spent in thought. This is a understanding of science. That means 95% of the day, he's not paying attention to his own behavior. He doesn't even see it. It's sort of like driving the car. I didn't see what happened. And so why is this relevant? The profound point of this story is we are all Bill. Every one of us lives 95% of the day out of programs, and we don't see it. Rarely we see it. We turn, oh my God, I just behaved like my mother or my father's like, now we're caught. But we saw it, but that's infrequent. So why is this relevant? If I get up during the day and I think I'm going forward to create the wishes and desires of my life, that's really great, but it only is working 5% of the day. 95% of the day, I'm going to play the programs. Psychologists have told us that 70% or more of these downloaded programs that we got as children are negative, disempowering, and self-sabotaging. So basically it says 95% of the day, your mind is thinking, and now you're playing your programs, and 70% of those are negative and disempowering, but you don't see them.
The roots of addiction, right there.
Right there. Because basically it says, I'm a victim. I wanted to be successful. Look what happened. So it's the outside that's interfering with me.
Okay. So this is very, very important. So as we reflect on our own personal histories, and I can look back on my childhood and I can tell you that there was some difficulty there, and a lot of people have had that.
Almost everybody.
Okay. For some reason, there's a class of people that end up finding drugs and alcohol or other addictive behaviors, and they go after them with their full heart. and in so doing...
Well, yeah, but not their complete mind.
But not their complete mind. Sure. But there's a group of people that have had difficult childhoods and have come through and have managed to process through it without becoming, say, addicts of any kind. There's another group of people that have succumbed to those old tapes, and the ways that they found to get out of those difficult feelings were destructive and addictive in some way. And then there's another group of people that maybe they're not complete drug addicts, their life doesn't implode because of an addictive behavior, but they're still really stuck in old patterns, and they don't process out. What do we do? So what's the prognosis and the diagnosis here? Because if you know that you've gotten these bad patterns and they're in your subconscious and these patterns are running, these tapes are running, now what's the process for recovery from that?
Okay, well, the first thing is the programming that gives us our basic behaviors, which I said was from, actually it starts before birth, last trimester of pregnancy, the fetus is already downloading behavior. Because it's responding to the mother. People don't understand this, is that When we talk about a fetus developing in a woman, we talk, oh, well, it's inside the placenta and the mother's blood comes up to the placenta and the nutrition crosses from the placenta into the fetus, and then the waste product from the fetus goes back to the mother through the blood. And everybody talks about, well, yeah, oh, that's the role of the mother. And the old story when I was teaching in medical school was, oh, look, all the mother has to do is provide nutrition because the genetics are going to control the development of this child. Well, that was before the new science of epigenetics, which is how environment selects the genes. Well, I said, well, wait a minute. In that case, then information from the mother can influence the genes. I go, absolutely. So when we talk about what is the mother providing, she's providing nutrition. That's why the standard thing about what advice can you give mothers? Exercise, eat well, take vitamins and supplements. And that's about all they say. And I go, well, yeah, but wait. We now know that the blood also it has more than just nutrition in it. The blood has emotional chemicals, hormones, growth factors, regulators. Relevance is, as the mother is providing nutrition, she's also providing information via the emotional chemicals and the hormones and what's going on.
So my mother, when she carried me, she drank very heavily and she smoked cigarettes very heavily,
Yes.
all the way through, straight through to 9 months. That had to have had, from what you're saying, that had to have had an influence on me.
Absolutely, 100%. But now there's two levels to that, because while you're inside in the fetal development, you are directly connected to the experiences of your mother. Nature designed it this way for a simple reason. Look, if I bring a sperm and egg together and create a new child, what's not left in that equation is what's the world like at this time? Because I have to adapt continuously to the world. So nature says, look, I'm going to put the genes into engagement to make a physical body. But what parts of the body should be enhanced or which should be repressed based on the behaviors needed to survive can only be based on what's happening at the moment. I can't project, I'm born and then I have a child 20 years later, my eggs or my sperm in my body cannot be connected to what's happening in 20 years. So basically, nature leaves open the programming part that says when you're developing, your mother is experiencing the world in which you're going to be born into.
Yes.
So if she can feed you some information first, then you can be prepared, your physiology and your biology prepared to go jump into the world.
Okay.
So when your mother was smoking and drinking, that was a consequence of some behavioral issue that elicited the smoking and drinking. As a fetus, you got both the information that caused the stress that was then relieved by taking the drugs. And so you were programmed with what? When this stress comes up, take a drug.
That's amazing.
Before you're even born. So that pre-programming is an unfortunate situation because that was put into the system without you consciously being involved. Again, your consciousness wasn't going to be really involved until about age 7. So basically, everything up to that point is a program.
I really want people to understand, from layman's terms, this point about epigenetics. And I've certainly looked at your work, and I love it, as I said. So nature will pack this human being. Nature will pack it full of the full genetic makeup. But which genes end up expressing, which genes end up being sort of turned on or turned off, if you will, has everything to do with the environment around me.
100%, because we have been, as a group, as a population, have been programmed with the belief that genes control our development. And therefore, by definition, when I was teaching that in medical school, because that's what we used to believe, what was I teaching? I was teaching, well, look, you're a victim of your heredity for this simple reason. You didn't pick the genes you came with, as far as we know. If you don't like the traits and characteristics, you can't change the genes. And then we tell the doctors, that's what I was teaching, who then tell the patients, look, it's not in your control. It's genetics, and genes turn on and genes turn off, and they regulate you. Well, first of all, that's completely false.
Thank God.
Genes have no on and off. This is the biggest error, because you say, well, the gene controls. I said, well, how does a gene control? It turns on. I go, no, a gene is a blueprint. It's exactly what it is. No, don't go any farther than that. It's a blueprint to make the protein building blocks of the body. I go, why is it relevant? I say, look, go into an architect's office. She's working on a blueprint. You say, is your blueprint on or off? And she looks at me, what do you mean on or off? It's a blueprint. It's no on and off. I go, precisely, because we talk about genes being on and off. I say, no, genes are blueprints. Somebody has to read the gene and engage the gene. The gene doesn't do it. So all of a sudden, the fact that we have said genes control things, this is a total false understanding. The genes respond to environmental signals. And that's what allows an organism to stay alive, because as the environment changes, it adjusts the genetics of the individual so that they stay lockstep with the environment.
Okay.
Okay.
So people who say that, my goodness, I've got a lot of alcoholism in my family, or, this addictive pattern or that addictive pattern, I'm a sitting duck for addiction because I have the genetic makeup of people coming down from people who are themselves struggling with addiction. What do you say?
Well, it's not the genetic makeup. You have the genetic programming. Okay. The programming is which genes are going to be engaged. So basically, when an organism responds to the environment, it takes in information from the environment and adjusts its biology to fit the environment. So the genes didn't make any decision in that. It was basically a response to the environment. But I learn responses to the environment. So if my mother has a behavior that's repetitious, remember, I'm the fetus inside that mother. Her blood is constantly passing through me. If she has a repetition in her behavior, I chemically can read that as a fetus. I can tell when she's stressed, when she's happy, what's going on. If she is repeating a behavior, and that's the thing, repetition, habituation, then the fetus learns pattern. If it's just a one-time shot, the fetus is like, well, I don't know what the heck that was all about. But if it repeats, the fetus learns a program. The program then controls the genes. So when you were born, you were programmed. In fact, it's very interesting. Most people out there have seen the movie The Matrix. And the Matrix talks about, this science fiction story about, you're programmed and then you could take the red pill and get out of the program. And the significant fact is, the Matrix is more of a documentary than a science fiction story. We actually have been programmed. And if you don't do anything, you will be the program. If you just were programmed and you don't make an effort to change the program, you will automatically continue the programming. We got programmed in the last trimester of pregnancy by the patterns through our mother's physiology. And then once we're born, we're programmed by hypnosis, by observing those teachers called parents and family. And we have these programs. Now, the problem with this is these programs are in the subconscious. And then I say, well, what's the problem? I said, well, this is what we talked about earlier, Tommy, when we said, yeah, but when the subconscious is running, I'm the one that doesn't see it.
That's right.
And so
no control at that point.
Victims.
Yeah, we perceive ourselves as victims. So let me ask you this. So for anybody who's struggling with addiction, and for anyone who's ever struggled with addiction, until you reach a bottom, and we can talk about what that means in biological terms, but before you reach a bottom and are forced to change, or you come to a place where you cannot continue to live the way you've been living, but you have no idea what to do next, you're at that point. What you're saying is that person has basically just been running patterns. In a sense, they have been a victim only by virtue of the fact that they've been running subconscious patterns they haven't been able to get beyond. They haven't come to light yet. But that once those things are brought to light through a process of recovery, we're no longer victims of our heredity. We can actually change the patterns.
That's the most important thing, is recognizing the pattern. And the fact is, since I said we play these behaviors when our conscious mind's not paying attention, that means even our conscious mind doesn't see the patterns most of the time, but occasionally it catches it, and then you freak yourself out. It's like, oh, what kind of behavior was that? But we don't recognize that's not just a rare event. That's an everyday event that you just rarely catch vision of. Yes.
Well, so what can we say? What helps a person along in a process of recovery? What are the things that could bring some of these subconscious patterns to light? Obviously, I'm a practitioner of yoga, a practitioner of meditation. These are positive lifestyle habits that hopefully help me to bring to light or shine a light on the darkness in my subconscious behavior. Would you say that's part of the process?
Well, the first part of the process is recognizing there's a problem. If you don't recognize a problem, then you are just like automatically programmed like a computer. You will run through the paces and your mind will be involved in la la land, thinking about all kinds of wonderful things as you're sabotaging your complete experience on this planet by running these programs that are self-sabotaging.
Yes.
So until you see a pattern, it's not available. Now, the other thing is this. One of the most effective ways of dealing with it was have people that are close enough that you can listen to them, because there's a tendency, if somebody says, oh, you've got this negative pattern, the first thing is defensive, wall up, no, I don't, that's what you see, that's not real, blah, 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 because we want to defend our own integrity. But the problem is, when other people can see things, like I can see that Bill behaves like his dad, he doesn't see it. If I can talk to Bill without getting his defenses up and say, look, you see, look what happened, how this worked out, that Bill can see it logically, what's going on. There's an opportunity for Bill not to put the defense up, which means now I'm open to deal with the issue. If I put the defense up, the issue doesn't exist anymore. If I, take the next drink, I can't remember the problem anymore. And so the question is, can you be open enough to recognize that A, you have behavior that you cannot see, and other people see it all the time? If you can do that, that means then you can be open enough to listen to the story without immediately closing everything down and saying, that's not true. And the issue is, of course, the biggest problem is that the wishes and desires of the conscious mind are not necessarily at all reflected in the programs of the subconscious mind. So the conscious mind is going to make up every reason why, no, man, I've been trying to do the best I possibly can. I go, yeah, but if you're only doing it 5% of the day, then it's irrelevant what the heck you're trying to do.
Right.
So you have to change that. So first, recognizing the problem. This is the big issue.
Yes. Now, obviously, one of the things that gets in the way of people moving forward in their life onto a path of recovery is they carry a tremendous amount of shame and guilt.
Yes. And I need to address that right now, Tommy, because this is the most important thing. Shame, guilt, blame, victim, words like that. Okay. People have to understand that in the definition of these words, it means this. I can be, ashamed of what I did if I knew there was a right way and I knowingly chose the wrong way. In other words, I am guilty if I know that this was the right thing to do, and with that knowledge, decide to do the other thing anyway. Here's the issue. If I didn't know what was going on, I had no idea of the programming, I had no idea of the meaning, then by definition, I cannot use the words blame, guilt, shame, victim. Why? I had no knowledge of it. And therefore, those words only apply if you have knowledge. If you have no knowledge, then you're just playing the game, oblivious as to what the consequences are. Okay, and so therefore, these words. Let's say, for example, you're here with me, and I say, listen, Tommy, take my car down to the store and get something, and it's stick shift. You get in the car and say, I don't know how to drive stick shift. I say, here, just go, drive. You call me from downtown saying, hey, the clutch doesn't work anymore in the car. And do I say, oh, I'm going to blame you for that? And the reality is, oh, wait a minute. You told me you didn't know how to do the car. I said, go ahead and do it. You have no instructions, but I encourage you to do it. If it messes up, it's not your fault. It's my fault. I'm the one that has the knowledge. Sure. You have no knowledge. Sure. So I cannot blame you.
But
this, yeah.
So addiction sort of presents an interesting set of circumstances because many people, for example, people who are chronic relapsers. Now, I relapsed many, many times in the early part of my recovery. I went there. I went back knowing I had knowledge. I knew this was not good for me. I was not in denial. It was more like, I just want to do this. And I know
but this is important, Tommy, because at this point, now we're still dealing with two minds. Your conscious mind is the one who's like, oh, this is not what I really want to do. And I go, well, that's great. 5% of the time. The rest of your programming is, this is what I have to do. That's the habit. So the reality is, your consciousness was not running a show. You were not being mindful. Mm-hmm. Mindful is the issue, meaning if you stop thinking and just be here, then you can see what's going on and you're in total control of the car.
Yes.
But the moment your mind wanders, you put on autopilot. It's just like the plane.
Yes.
The pilot has to go take a leak, put on autopilot, and it'll come back. And autopilot is programmed to to make it stay right where it is.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Well, the issue is this: conscious mind is you got your hands on the wheel, and subconscious mind is autopilot. 95% of the day you're in the autopilot, and your conscious mind is more like in the back seat of the car, and there's a driver in the front seat, and you're saying, "Hey, listen, turn left, turn left. That's what I want," and then the car turns right, and it's like,
so how do we deal with somebody in that situation who says to you, Bruce, on the conscious mind level, I knew what I was doing, I knew it was wrong. But I'm still, as you said, I'm not mindful, so I'm not really operating in my full mind in alignment. So I still did the behavior, and bad things happen, and now I feel ashamed of myself.
Yeah, but you can't feel ashamed of yourself, because if you knew how to control this, you would have done it. And if you had no knowledge how to control it, then you're a victim of something out of your control.
Thank you.
And at that point, how can I be responsible?
Thank you. So to the people listening out there, this is a very prominent PhD scientist telling us that there is no room and no place for guilt and shame in addictive behavior. Once we are mindful, once we have moved beyond. So I want to talk about that for a minute. So in my recovery, I came to a place, it took me a couple of years, but I did come to a place where I realized I no longer actually was thinking about using drugs and alcohol. That had been lifted from me. And I knew that I actually did want to be on a path of recovery. And now I was more concerned about, all right, how am I going to be on this path of recovery and be on it well? Whereas before I had been still like, maybe I want to be on this path, maybe I don't really know if I'm going to make it or how, or even if I want to. So that next level where you finally, I would say I became mindful at that point, where all of me really actually wanted to be sober. So can you address what is happening at that moment for someone like me?
Well, this is the moment where you start to see that the patterns are playing. You're sitting in the back seat of your vehicle, backseat driving, and you wanted to go, and it's not going that way. And at some point, you say, "Listen, I got to put my hands on the wheel. I got to do it myself." And that's when you start to become mindful. But every moment, the moment your mind starts to slip off, you will slip back into this program again. And the issue about it is, knowing you have a program and seeing it, because as I said, most people don't see it. So that's the biggest problem, is because if you don't see you're involved, then by definition, you're a victim. It's not me, because I didn't do anything. I said, yeah, but you did, but you didn't see it. So you have to become aware. And that's an important part, because this is when the blame and the game and all that stuff comes in is, well, now that you know how it works, I cannot fall back on, what happened? I don't know what happened. It's like, no, now you know.
Yes.
Now these words are important, because now it says, yeah, I know how it works, and I'm not doing anything about it. Now I am guilty, but I didn't know how it worked before. I wasn't guilty. But now that I know how it works, then it's incumbent upon me to make the changes.
So there's good news and there's bad news here, as I see it.
Well, yeah, the bad news is, well, look, you've been programmed, and the good news is you can change the program.
Well, the good news, I would say, is that we actually have some control over our destiny. And
100%.
And the bad news is we have some control over our destiny. We're in the driver's seat.
The interesting part about this is, in my book called The Honeymoon Effect, I talk about when people fall in love and how their lives change at that moment. All of a sudden, they're more healthy than they've been before. They have tremendous amount of energy, that their behavior is leading to an expression of heaven on earth. I've fallen in love and it's heaven on earth. And it's like, well, guess what? That was not a coincidence. Here's what it was. It was the first time in most people's lives where they became mindful. This is what science has revealed, that when we fall in love, there's a tendency not to think, because if you're thinking, then you're not here. But if everything you wanted is in front of your face, why would you think about it? It's like, this is what you wanted. Well, why is that relevant? If I'm not deferring or defaulting to my subconscious, then during that time period, I'm running my life with full conscious control, hands on the wheel. And what did I create? Heaven on earth. And that's called the honeymoon effect. And I go, well, then what happens? I say, well, after a while, that honeymoon disappears. I go, why does it disappear? Because life gets busy. We start thinking. The moment we start thinking a lot, then we start defaulting to the programs. Well, the behaviors that are in the subconscious came from other people. And up until this moment, the partner you've had the honeymoon experience with only saw you creating from conscious wishes and desires. Both people doing that, wishes and desires, is heaven on earth at that point.
Powerful,
Okay.
very powerful.
But the moment thought comes into the process, then the responses that occur, the behavior that occurs, is not coming now from the conscious mind, it's coming from the subconscious program, which is other people's behavior. If you would have played some of those behaviors on your first date, let's say, you may have not had a second date. But now they haven't played. Why? Because I've been conscious this entire time called the honeymoon. I've been creating beautiful life and experiences, but then I start thinking because I got a job, I got to pay the rent, I got to do the chores, and my partner comes up and asks me a loving question. And we've had this great heaven on earth thing going because both conscious minds have been engaged. And at this moment, I'm thinking, and she comes up and asks me a simple, loving question. And I turn around and go, blah, blah, blah. And she looks at me and goes, who are you?
Right. Haven't seen this guy before.
Well, but this is an instructive thing because basically it says, well, what happens? It says this, that the person who I just played blah, 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 my partner looks at me, who is, like something's wrong. And I'm looking at her like, what are you talking about? Point. When I did blah, 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 I did that from automatic behavior. I played my father's behavior. I didn't even see it. That's like, Bill, what do you mean my father's behavior, right? Well, the problem is, if I didn't see what I did and my partner saw what I did, and I, in the conventional world, thinking, what the hell is she talking about? At that point, you can see all of a sudden the communication lines are completely down.
Yes.
This thing is not going to work anymore.
Well, this is how relationships end. And, I think really important to realize for people in our society that if you hold on to this idea of, say, soulmate or the honeymoon should last forever, when you come to that first bump in the road and you fall out of that heaven on earth syndrome that you spoke of, if you don't know that that's part of the natural cycles of a relationship and it's going to come and it's going to go, and our job is to bring mindfulness to it, then the first time or maybe the second time that happens, you're like, I'm out of here.
Exactly.
I'm gone.
Exactly. 50% of marriages end that way because people don't realize the behavior they play after the honeymoon starts to wane because they start thinking is not them, it's other people's behavior, and they're invisible. It's invisible to them. And therefore they're trying to figure out what's wrong with my partner who's mad at me. What did I do? And it's like, yeah, what you did is what you didn't see what you did.
Yes.
But if we now have knowledge of that, you see, without knowledge, that's what led to, oh my God, what kind of behavior is that? Do I want to be with this person with that kind of behavior? That's when compromises come in. And that's what really ruins the marriage, because it says, well, that behavior really sucks, but the rest of it's pretty good. And so I compromise. I know that this person gets angry and violent at some point. Okay. But that's just rare. And the point about it is, well, wait a minute, you compromised. And this is not the relationship you signed on for. And as every new behavior starts to unfold, because they've been in the back waiting for my mind to wander to show up, as each one starts to show up, each is another opportunity for another compromise. And the point is, there's so many compromises, as you just said. And there's a point, well, that's too many compromises. Now it's all over. And then both people are there like, what happened?
Right.
This started out so beautifully.
As opposed to working through those issues as they come up in a conscious manner, often with a third party present.
Right. And the problem with us as the recipient of the anger of our partner about our behavior without us knowing we even did the behavior is where the problem is. So now I say, look, now we become aware of this. Why is it relevant? Because if the behavior shows up and I'm aware of it, that I have behaviors that are invisible, and my partner brings it to my attention, rather than conflict, I'd have to maybe I did do that.
Yes.
Oh my God, I'm sorry. Well, what happens is every time it comes up, if my partner just gently says, oh, that's that behavior again, every time it comes up and I stop it, I'm creating a new habit. And that, which ultimately says the new habit replaces the old habit. The negative thing that was there, all of a sudden, every time I stop it, the mind begins to learn. Don't play that behavior. Yes. I got a new behavior, and that's how we rewrite.
I want to talk a little bit for our last bit of this chat we're having today about 12-step programs, and the reason why they are successful and when they work the best.
But they also have a negative a negative connotation to them.
I want to get your opinion on all this, because I have many opinions on this, and I talk and write a lot about it, but I'd like to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah, well, let's just say here the 12-step programs are good because they say be more mindful. That's what it says. Be mindful. Start to see what's going on. Because if you don't look at what's going on, then everything is an accident in your life. Everything, I'm the victim. So it's a wake-up call to say, look, if you pay attention, you can do something about it. If you don't pay attention, your mind wanders, then you're back into the automatic program again. The unfortunate side of 12-step programs is many of them tell a person that they're totally defective and program them to be defective. It says like alcoholism. It's like, oh, you take that drink, one drink, and boy, you're on the out in the street again. Well, the problem is every time they hear that, what are they creating? A new habit. So the new habit is if I drink, then I'm out on the street. And unconsciously, by repeating that pattern, that says I'm a defect, and that this is going to happen to me, allows a program to be created that offers me an opportunity to understand that, oh, I took that one drink, now I'm out on the street,
or now I have to take it all the way, and I'm gonna behave in such a way where I land on the street.
Right. That again is making a person a victim of something that it's a program. Why is it important? If it was genes that controlled you, if it was, and they're not, and I said genes control your life, then by definition, I can say you can be a victim. Why? Because you didn't pick the genes and that's what you ended up with. I'm sorry, your genes are giving you this problem. But it turns out genes are only responsible about 1% of disease in the world. The rest of it is programming.
Rewrite the language for me. In other words,
that's the issue.
What would you say to improve and to not put that negative pattern, that negative thought pattern into someone's head? How would you rephrase that for somebody?
I would rephrase
you've had this drink. What are we teaching people really?
Well, right now the way we're teaching them is if you cross the line, I'm sorry, you're lost, and that's an unfortunate situation because if I do get pushed and I do cross the line and my program gets engaged, it's like, oh my goodness, I just crossed the line. The rest of the program is, oh, now I'm lost, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're gone out of the system. If we would stop teaching that there was a mechanical reason for your victimization and understand that it's a programming reason for your victimization, then I have freedom to change the programming. If it's mechanical, then I'm just a victim of the mechanics. And that turns out, but that's not true. We bought it as mechanical because everything was controlled by genes when these 12-step programs were introduced. So all of a sudden, it's like, oh yeah, the genes did it. That just would have been science. But today's world, that's totally false. Because we know the genes don't do that. The program does that. And so what I would start to be teaching is you have been programmed. You are living in the matrix. You need to take the red pill. And the red pill is get out of the programming. And the idea is if I can tell you how to get out of the programming, then I can help you. But here's the biggest problem then second. Okay, I got some bad behavior. And they say, oh, well, how are you going to change the program? Oh, well, I'm going to tell you about your bad behavior and then you're going to have an awareness. And I go, this is the crux of the problem. There are two minds we talked about: conscious mind, you, spirit, that's your creative mind, subconscious mind, habits, and programs. Well, guess what? They don't learn in the same way. The conscious mind's creative. That's the character of it. So it says, look, I can go to a lecture, I can watch a video, I could read a book,
go on a workshop,
do a workshop, and I'm going to educate my conscious mind. Go, yeah, that's exactly how it works. Conscious mind could just go, aha, and learn something, okay? The subconscious mind does not learn in that way. That's why when I say in some of my lectures, I say, okay, how many people in here have read a self-help book? And all the hands go up. I say, okay, now how many of you, your lives changed after you read the self-help book? All the hands go back down. I say, well, what's the issue? And the issue is this: you educated your conscious mind, the creative mind, by reading a book. But the subconscious mind doesn't learn that way. And it's very important. It's resistant to change. Why? If I learned a habit, I don't want it to change every day. If I learned how to walk, I don't want to have to relearn how to walk all the time. If I learned how to do it, then fine. So that basically says then the subconscious mind is resistant to change. I say number one.
So what happens? How does it do it? Like if you're sober a number of years.
I have to go back and say, well, how did you educate the subconscious mind in the first place? I go, first 7 years, hypnosis. That's what the brain was in theta. It was just downloading programs, bypassing consciousness. Our conscious minds did not filter the download of the programs and say good program, bad program. Why? Conscious mind wasn't working when the downloads were going. So I just got programs. Conscious mind wasn't even there. Doesn't even have any idea of it. So, excuse me. The next issue is this. Okay, your brain is in hypnosis for first 7 years, but your subconscious still learns programs after you're 7. I say, how does it learn it then? I go, oh, habituation, repetition. Repeat the behavior over and over and over again.
Whether that's a healthy behavior or an unhealthy behavior, you'll learn a new pattern depending on what you practice.
Absolutely, because the function of that mind is to take pattern that is replayed over and over again and then acquired. That's why, look, you want to learn how to drive a car? Practice how to drive a car. You want to go back to this one. This is learning our ABCs. Go back to your childhood. How long did it take you to get from A to Z? And the answer was, how many times did you start? A, B, C, D, E. And then you repeated it, you repeated it, you repeated it, and finally you got to Z. What was the result? I never had to do it again. I habituated it because I repeated it over and over and over again. That's how I learned. How many times did I repeat the times table in school? Whatever issue on a job, I learned to do the job. I learned how to communicate. All these different things. So basically, how'd you do that? Repetition. After the first 7 years, which is hypnosis. So the idea is this. If you go and just educate the conscious mind, that's great. Most everybody's conscious mind super educated. Oh yeah, I know exactly the right thing, but my life doesn't follow it. And I go, yeah, because you're not operating from that mind, and the awareness in that mind does not translate into a change in the subconscious, because it's not the way the subconscious learned.
Yes.
So if you want to change, then you got to say, well, how does it do it? There are 4 ways that the subconscious mind can be rewritten. One of them you can't even control. So we can bring it up right now because you've experienced it yourself. And that is, you get into a life situation where, and you realize, I can't do this anymore. It's nothing you can control. It's sort of like you go to the doctor and the doctor all of a sudden sits across the desk and says, you have a terminal disease. Whoa, boom. It hits you in the head. And it's like, oh my God, my whole life has led to this. And that's an open moment where all of a sudden you can change a behavior. But the problem with that is you can't control it. Yes, I can't control when that happens.
Spiritual awakening.
Yeah, so we put that in a separate category. It occurs, but I can't do anything about it. That leaves me, there are 3 remaining ways. Like, well, what's one way? Well, I say hypnosis. You say, well, okay, when I was a kid, my brain was operating at that frequency, and that's how I downloaded. Now I'm an adult. What happens now? And I go, every day as you go to bed at night, or when you're waking up in the morning, you pass through theta for a simple reason. Sleeping is the lowest vibration called delta. Theta is the next one. Consciousness is alpha. And the higher one is beta, which is, working consciousness. You're working up here in beta on your job. When you come home at night, you start to relax and you start to go into alpha, relaxing, okay? As you start to drift off into sleep, you're going from alpha into theta. So it's called twilight reverie. And the significance about that is that means as you're passing from being alert to going to sleep, which is delta, you must pass through theta. So as you're going to bed at night, if you put earphones on and have a tape that's playing, as you're going from alpha and you start to relax and you start to go into theta, the tape is playing, your conscious mind's not paying attention really now, it's really offline, and the subconscious is listening to the tape. So every night as you go to bed, you put the earphones on, you will pass through theta and you will be directly downloading a new program into your subconscious. That's one way, okay? Number 2, the second way we learn is habituation. And so the idea is the more you make a habit of something and repeat it, and this is what people have to understand, putting a sticky note on the refrigerator is more like a wish. It's not a repetition. Right. It's just like, oh, every now and then I say, oh yeah, there's that note. It's like, that's not making a habit. Habit is you engage in it and you practice it and you repeat it. Yes. And you repeat it.
Like going to 90 meetings in 90 days, for example.
Yeah. You're making a pattern, and once you start to see the pattern and it repeats itself, there's an opportunity then that's how the subconscious mind learns, okay? The third way is exciting because it's something brand new. And that is, it's called collectively referred to as energy psychology or belief modification. And what it really these are processes that engage a super learning. You say, what's super learning? I say, well, have you ever seen anybody read a book with their finger? They just go down the page, read the page as fast as the finger moves, they're reading. Okay. That's a concept of super learning. Okay. Well, the significance about that can be applied to changing subconscious programs. So many of these belief modalities that are changing beliefs get you into a state of super learning, give you a new program, and 10 minutes later, you got a new program. And this is really exciting. And it's I look at it as that story about necessity is the mother of invention. And it's like we have a necessity to change now because we are in a very threatened world situation and we've got to change our behavior quickly. So necessity leads to these new modalities. And they're very effective. And the one that I'm familiar with is the one that I use my own self to get out of my old life and into my new life is one called Psych-K. Now, what's interesting about it for years, like all the other modalities that are similar, it's like you go through a change of belief and then you go, oh yeah, I feel much better. My life is much better. And that's all anecdotal. But recently, now there's been brain mapping studies to show that when a person does like a Psych-K balance, the brain changes in 10 minutes in a way that that the people that are studying this have never seen this in any other form. So this is opening up a new doorway.
Yes, I'm interested. I'm very interested. I have no personal experience with it, but I'd like to give it a try.
Well, this is very exciting because, of course, I have personal experience with it because, I had to change my life in many different ways. And once I understood this, for me, it was very personal for a very simple reason. Here I am giving lectures all around the world about how genes don't control life, how programming controls life. And then at the end of every lecture, because I start off with a whole molecular thing and get to, oh, yeah, the programming. And then the first question always at the end of my lectures, how do I change the programming? I go, that's not my job. I change the programming. And one lecture I was giving in Colorado, I was then same thing. And I get very upset because I'm really all excited about the science part. And everybody says, oh, okay, that's nice. Show me how to change the program. It's sort of like, so I'm walking back with my computer after my presentation. And I hear the guy behind me say, I'm going to show you how to change those beliefs. And I thought, okay, I'll watch. And I saw him, he asked, who wants to have a belief change? Of course, almost everybody's hand in the room went up. There was one woman whose hand was up and down and up and down. I saw her, and my friend Rob, who was presenting, saw her and said, okay, tell us your name and what the problem is. And in the middle of an audience of 300 or 400 people, he said, tell us your name and problem. And the words came out of her mouth. She just got red. He had to go in the audience and find out, well, her name is Pauline, and her problem is she can't talk in public. It was like, well, that's pretty damn obvious, isn't it? She couldn't even say her name. So he goes through this process, one of these, and it's not the only one, there are many of them. My website has a whole listing of them. Took 10 minutes. And at the end of dealing this process, she was sitting in a chair and he says, okay, let's stand up. He turns her around, his arm is on her shoulder and says, oh, Pauline, would you like to tell the audience about this experience you just had? Well, she took the mic and started walking back and forth, giving a lecture that the joke, Rob had to say, listen, Pauline, please sit down. You're using up my lecture time. And all that. And everybody like myself in the audience was, oh, my God, here's a woman 10 minutes ago, couldn't say her name. Now he has to ask her to sit down and be quiet because she's talking so much.
So this is called Psych-K.
Like psychology abbreviation -K, which is psychological kinesiology, psych-K.com. Okay. And that's just one of many. It's just the one I'm familiar with. But then I've listed on my website a whole lot of them. They're all similar to a certain degree because they're a way of opening up the record. It's like pushing a record button that we couldn't have done in any other way. But it's actually, I think it involves getting right and left brain hemispheres to fire in synchrony. Yes. Which is a super learning process.
Love it. Amazing. And now, unfortunately, we're coming to the end of our hour together, but I'm wondering if you could, I know it's crazy. Could you give your message of hope to people who are watching this who may be struggling or struggling with addiction, or people who are on a path of recovery, but still don't feel like they're quite where they want to be yet? Yeah. What would you say to these people?
Well, the first thing I have to say is, look, everyone's familiar with a phrase called knowledge is power. And I say, that's very interesting, but let me give you the corollary because that's more personal. I say a lack of knowledge is a lack of power. When we have been deprived of the knowledge of how things work, and we're trying to make it work and nobody gave you instructions or anything, basically it's like, well, now it's trial and error. And again, we go back to the driving thing. If nobody ever gave you driver instructions, says get in the car and drive, you'll probably destroy the car before you really get it on the road. The idea is we have new knowledge, and the knowledge is critical because it explains the invisible part. The invisible part was the misleading part. If I didn't see I was engaged in my own sabotage, then by definition, I'm not going to blame me. I'm going to say the world is not supporting me. The universe is not supporting me. Why? I didn't see I was involved. But now we have this knowledge. And now it says, okay, look, we have to transition from lack of knowledge to this new knowledge. And when you have this knowledge, knowledge is power, then we have the power to make the changes. If you have no knowledge of what we just talked about during the last hour, you'd be oblivious as to what the hell is going on. I'm making my effort, and I'm going, yeah, but you see, you didn't know that only applied 5% of the time, and it didn't change the subconscious program, because the moment you're not going to pay attention, you will default automatically. Yes. And that's where the concept of victim comes in. I'm going, geez, that's an unfortunate situation. And you know what's really interesting, and you know, because it bothers me a lot, is that the idea of being programmed and controlling your life is not new. This understanding has been around 500 years. The Jesuits would say, give me a boy until it's 7 and I will show you the man. What they understood is, if I get your programming, they even knew 7 years. They said, if I get 7 years, if I put the programs in you in 7 years, I don't care what your personal wishes and desires are. You're going to be whatever I made the program.
Yes.
Well, we've all been programmed. And that's why The Matrix, as I said, is really a documentary. We've all been programmed. Some of us really have bad programs. But the significance is, to the leadership of the world, they don't care.
Right. But we as individuals, thanks to your work, are becoming aware of the fact that we can change that programming, that there is a choice, that we're not a victim of our heredity or our genetic makeup.
Yes.
That our beliefs, our actions, our inputs can have a major effect on our life, and we can turn ourselves around.
Absolutely. We're just more powerful than we thought. But if I don't teach you how it works, then you're completely invalidated in your attempt to be, to take control, because you didn't see how it was done.
Yes. Thank you so much, Bruce. Can you direct people to your work? How can they interact with you?
Simple.
Yes.
Very simple. www.brucelipton.com. There's lots of resources under the resources. As I said, there's a whole listing of all these other modalities for changing psychology. But I also have lots of articles and things downloaded and resources. So there's a tremendous amount of literature available for free just to download it to give us more awareness of who we are and how we work.
I cannot thank you enough for lending your voice to Recovery 2.0 conference this year. Thank you so much, Bruce.
Tommy, thank you. And I want to thank your audience, because everybody who really puts an interest in to do something can change themselves and the world. And so this is a wonderful platform to offer new knowledge to people in need. Thank you very much.
And to you. Be well.
Thank you.